negotiations with the White House. We can tell you tonight the wait is ended. It took until today, 1 week exactly, for the Dems and rhinos to overreach and to misjudge how much President Trump would put up with in the name of bipartisan bargaining. Rhino Republican Senator Jeff Flake also lived up to his name today when he and his colleague Bob Menendez declared that a group made up of these 6 senators, open borders and amnesty enthusiasts, all had come to terms on a DACA deal.
We have an agreement that we're, the bipartisan group I'm talking about, the 6 of us working, that we're shopping among our colleagues now. We don't want to release details until we talk to more of our colleagues.
I think we have, among the 6 of us, an agreement in principle on all of the core issues.
But is there an issue about getting that through a Republican House and a Republican Senate with just this small rump group?
Well, I don't consider it a rump group.
Okay.
And we're in the midst of vetting it with other colleagues.
Well, whatever you would call it, rump group seems entirely serviceable for 6 like-minded senators who've decided that being like-minded when they began, that they're like-minded now. Senator Menendez, who just 2 months ago was facing trial for corruption. The White House denied any deal on DACA. Here's Press Secretary Sarah Sanders knocking down Flake's nonsense.
There has not been a deal reached yet. However, we still think we can get there, and we're very focused on trying to make sure that that happens. The president's been clear about what his priorities are in that process, and we're going to continue working with members of the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, to make sure that we try to get that deal done.
The negotiators looked especially foolish focusing on DACA while the border with Mexico is aflame. A record number of murders in Mexico, cartel violence raging throughout the nation. The U.S. State Department has now warned Americans that it's dangerous to travel to Mexico, and the State Department issued the highest warning for 5 states in Mexico, the second highest warning for all of the border states just south of our border. Border security and the wall are obviously a critical matter of national security, but the rhinos and the left wing of the Democratic Party, well, they're committed to ignoring it. And among our guests tonight, the Secretary of State of Kansas and candidate for governor, Chris Kobach, who says the DACA amnesty must end. Also tonight, President Trump keeping the pressure on North Korea, even as he continues the diplomacy that forced Kim Jong-un to the negotiating table with South Korea. The Trump administration concurrently ordering the U.S. Air Force to deploy 3 nuclear-capable B-2 stealth bombers to Guam, a frequent target of North Korea's threats. We'll take up the president's efforts to rein in Kim Jong-un with Fred Fleitz coming up. Our top story tonight, those 6 senators claiming they've reached a deal on DACA, raising these discussions to the level of a farce. Obama-era amnesty to protect young illegal immigrants from deportation. The so-called Gang of 6 is a really special bunch that you should know more about. Senator Jeff Flake isn't running for re-election because he wouldn't win. Senator Bob Menendez, as I said, was facing corruption charges just 2 months ago on trial. Senators Lindsey Graham, Dick Durbin, and Michael Bennet, well, you may remember those names because they're former members of the sad Gang of 8 group that was pushing amnesty, and luckily, futilely so. And Cory Gardner is a longtime supporter of amnesty. So you see, they had consensus before they even began. And they claim a consensus among a group of like-minded advocates of amnesty and open borders is just simply, well, it's sad, but at the same time hilarious. And will only now make a deal, I think, harder to construct. President Trump today rejected the bipartisan compromise with some colorful language in an Oval Office meeting. Fox News chief congressional correspondent Mike Emanuel live now on Capitol Hill with the latest for us. Good evening, Mike.
Lou, good evening. As you well know, this is 6 senators saying they support this agreement, but it takes 60 senators to pass something in the U.S. Senate. So clearly there is plenty of work ahead. These senators have been meeting for 4 months, trying to come up with a compromise on those children who were brought to this country illegally by their parents, and they say they're working to build support now with their colleagues.
We have no agreement with the president. We didn't go there to say, would you agree to this? this is our idea. Would you consider this? He challenged us to come up with an idea. And we've come up with an idea.
But Mark Short from the White House said there is no deal. Majority Whip John Cornyn told reporters he welcomes his fellow senators' contribution, but this immigration issue is not going to be settled by just a handful of people. And a leading conservative said lawmakers will likely need more time to come up with a final deal.
The president is willing to grant legal protections for this population of illegal immigrants in return for adequate security and ending extended family chain migration and ending the diversity lottery. There's no change to those parameters.
However, top Democrats are trying to link addressing the status of those young people with budget and government funding talks, and the government runs out of money in 8 days. Speaker Paul Ryan has acknowledged another short-term continuing resolution will likely be needed. That way there won't be a partial government shutdown, and there will be time for negotiators to allocate money based on new spending caps.
We're working with our counterparts on getting a cap agreement, but the appropriators will need time to be able to write an actual omnibus appropriations once a cap agreement is met.
But there's no point in having another CR unless we have an agreement on DACA and on funding.
That is leading some to make the case that Pelosi is pushing for a government shutdown over an artificial deadline on DACA. Lou?
Mike, it certainly sounded like that is exactly what she's doing. Tying it directly to the funding talks is a dangerous thing to do, whether Republican or Democrat, right?
No question about that. The Democrats feel like they have a lot of leverage because they feel like Democrat votes will be needed to pass a budget agreement and a continuing resolution to keep the lights on in the federal government. And so they're trying to use that leverage right now to try to force a DACA deal over the next 8 days. And so you've got this fundamental challenge ahead as lawmakers try to work out some of the fiscal issues by throwing a very complicated and controversial issue like immigration into the mix.
Mike, thank you very much. Mike Emanuel reporting from Capitol Hill. Thank you. The left, the rhinos, are pushing what would be a disastrous deal. Senator Lindsey Graham and Dick Durbin now proposing to cut the visa lottery program by only 50%. The president wants the foolishness, the absurdity of a lottery, visa lottery, to end. The lawmakers are also trying to restore protections for Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries that have been removed from the so-called temporary protected status program. And their compromise would give the president a measly $1.5 billion for the border wall. The Dems and the rhinos, in fact, are insulting President Trump as he extended a hand to them to work out a deal that would work. In my opinion, the Dems and those rhino Republicans are being frivolous and hardly worth the president's time. Our first guest tonight says it's shocking that amnesty is even being talked about after the American people in 2016 made it perfectly clear we had elected a president whose top issue on the campaign trail was all about the wall and no amnesty. Joining us tonight, Chris Kobach, Kansas Secretary of State, candidate for governor of the great state of Kansas, and a nationally recognized litigator representing citizens, cities, states in cases involving illegal immigration. Chris, it's good to see you, and the very idea that this would be the response from 6 senators, and you know them all, I mean, this is farcical. It's insulting. It's such an absurd response to a serious offer to negotiate from this president.
It's outrageous, Lou, and I agree with all that you've said. I mean, look, the president said back in the campaign that he was against any amnesty. I think regular watchers of your show know that amnesties are bad policy. They're very damaging to our country. If you look at the DACA amnesty, people talking about it as if this is an amnesty for some kids. No, the average age is 24. These are illegal aliens in their 20s and 30s. We would be legalizing almost 1 million of them to compete against our kids. And our Americans in that age group have a 9% unemployment rate, and the underemployment rate, that is people who don't have a full-time job or have no job at all, is 34% for those in that age group who lack a college education, which is 2/3 of them. So our kids, our Americans in that age group are struggling. And to legalize this contingent of DACA aliens to compete against their own is bad policy. So we would only consider that. I would only consider that. You've never heard me say I've ever would think an amnesty would be okay. If it was guaranteed, if that's all it was, no additional bells and whistles on that amnesty. but there were a lot of law enforcement things to counterbalance it. And I think in addition to what the president mentioned on the Tuesday meeting, you've also got to have mandatory E-Verify nationwide, which is basically what the Goodlatte bill does. It does the three things the president asked for plus E-Verify. If you do all that, yeah, then maybe we could stomach the bad policy of an amnesty.
Well, the president, to his great credit, brought in Bob Goodlatte, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, author of the bill that you referenced, and Senator Tom Cotton. But against the backdrop of those 6 senators, I cannot tell you how disturbing it is that they would try to run a game so insulting to the President of the United States, whether it's his name is Obama, Bush, or Trump. That's an insult to the office. It is disgusting that they would even play that kind of game.
Yeah, the starting position should be what the president laid out at that extraordinary Tuesday meeting. It should, for these 6 guys to go off and say, hey, we'll take a souped-up DACA amnesty with a bunch of additional amnesties tacked on, and we'll give you a tiny morsel, Mr. President, of what you asked for. It is insulting, and it just kind of shows how far off to the left these individuals are.
And Dianne Feinstein sitting across from the president last Thursday, saying suddenly, well, you know, Mr. President, we got a great deal for you. We'll take a clean DACA bill, giving us the left and the establishment right, everything that we've asked for, plus we'll give you comprehensive immigration reform, which is what the same group have demanded for the past 12 years. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
It really was. And it just shows you, I think to a certain extent, Senator Feinstein had maybe been encouraged by some of the Republicans in the room saying, oh, yeah, we want to do DACA, we've got to do DACA. But my point, Lou, is we don't have to do DACA. It's bad for our country, and we would only consider doing it under circumstances where it was a very good deal for the American people. And those 6 senators you've been describing, that deal doesn't even come close being anything good for America.
And this president has put forward the Trump doctrine, which is America first.
Absolutely.
How those 6 senators could even imagine they could sell such nonsense to the president is beyond me. Chris Kobach, as always, good to see you. Thank you.
Great to see you, Lou.
We're coming right back. Much more straight ahead. Stay with us. Walmart is boosting its minimum wage and handing out bonuses. And who made that possible? President Trump.
Walmart is the latest company to make such an announcement, directly a result of the Tax Cuts Act. And they join over 130 other companies across the nation who have already given such relief.
We take up the soaring economy under this president with Ed Rollins. And 2 days after rivers of mud wreaked havoc on Southern California, rescuers are still searching for survivors. We'll have a full update on the devastating toll of the deadly mudslides here next. Stay with us. The Trump administration today announced it will now open the door for states to impose work requirements for recipients of Medicaid. Medicaid enrollment for the runaway welfare program has soared to 75 million people. Almost 1 out of every 5 Americans is on Medicaid. Medicaid is spending 30% of all state budgets. The number of working-age, able-bodied adults on the program has now quadrupled since 2000, 28 million people. And the fiscal cost of illegal immigration not doing much better, crushing taxpayers as well. Each year, shelling out approximately $135 billion to cover the costs incurred as a result of illegal immigration, amounting to a tax burden of approximately $8,000 for each illegal immigrant. California Senator Dianne Feinstein offering up one of the weakest rationalizations, explanations ever for endangering a congressional investigation, saying that she leaked the transcripts of Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson's testimony behind closed doors without the approval of the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley for a very simple reason. She wasn't feeling well.
The one regret I have is that I should have spoken with Senator Grassley before. And I don't make an excuse, but I've had a bad cold, and maybe that slowed down my mental facilities a little bit.
Joining us tonight, former Reagan political director, Fox business contributor, Ed Rollins. Ed, great to have you with us. Let's turn to Dianne Feinstein. I've got to tell you, after looking at the transcript, I'm glad she did it, to be honest. I think entirely too much of all of this investigation into the nonsense has been behind closed doors. The American people need to demand that every chairman turn over whatever the heck they've got.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the whole premise of having hearings that are open to the public is to let voters know what's actually going on. And so much of these things have been behind closed doors, witnesses behind closed doors. You know, once in a great while, there's some confidential information that you don't want to have disclosed, but not the general premise of all these hearings. Dianne Feinstein is going to see her cold and her inability to pass on and ask the permission of the chairman in advertising this year when she runs again for re-election. I can guarantee you that. It's about the weakest excuse I've ever seen. I had a cold, so I couldn't. And she had been the chairman of the committee, so she knows how important it is for the chairman and her.
Well, let's be honest. She wasn't really very much of a chairman. I mean, for crying out loud, John Brennan, then the head of the CIA, under President Obama, spied on the Senate Intelligence Committee, chaired by Senator Feinstein. She didn't do a thing about it.
I didn't say she was a good chairman. I simply stated she was the chairman, so she understands the rules and the regulations.
I took it a little farther.
Yes, you took it correctly.
As I often do.
Further, yes.
Often do. Let's go to this bull with these 6 senators, 3 rhinos, and 3 left-wingers. And the next thing you know, they've reached consensus on, of all things, illegal immigration and specifically DACA, and had the effrontery to stand before cameras and talk about Menendez and Flake, about what a great accomplishment they had made.
Well, for the 2 of them to agree, I'm sure that's great. You just need 60 more, or at least 58 more members to go along with them, which I don't see that happening. Yeah, I think to a certain extent, this whole gang of 8, gang of 6, whatever, we need to get back to let committees run their committees. Chairmen need to run the committees. They need to basically come up with a comprehensive bill. You don't like the word comprehensive, but the comprehensive to me means security and immigration reform.
Well, let's talk about comprehensive, because comprehensive, it's also important to talk about the sequence of whatever is in that comprehensive.
Security first.
Where in the, I mean, the president is not saying build the wall first. He's saying give us the funding for it. Their first installment on that came back at another $1.5 billion.
The only problem with all those things, a lot of promises get made, and especially when you're dealing with money.
And they're lying through their teeth.
And it never happens. You know, I mean, I've watched this immigration battle before, in which a lot of money was allocated, never got spent. And I think to a certain extent, we need the guarantee that this border is going to be secure, more secure than it is today. And I think the president and his people have done an extremely effective job of reducing the numbers of illegals coming across.
By the way, that has reversed itself. We are now seeing those levels back to Obama-era numbers. And at the same time, Mexico, which is the source of most of the methamphetamines, marijuana, cocaine, and heroin that enter this country. And this president, to his credit, the law and order presidential candidate and the man who has brought the opioid crisis to attention on the campaign trail, I mean, it is the border with Mexico, as I said earlier, is aflame. It is filled with violence, corruption, and they're talking about so-called dreamers.
Well, there's a war going on that border, and there's been more people killed on the other side of that border in the last couple of years than was killed in the whole Vietnam War. So, I mean, I think the wall is important. I think the security is more important than anything else.
Then how do you explain they're talking about DACA?
You know, DACA is the passionate issue that Democrats can go out and say the poor and the disadvantaged and what have you. And as I said last night, they're always about increasing. I think the reality is these young people came in the country illegally, and they basically need to be dealt with as illegals. And they may benefit long term, but short term they need to be treated like everybody else.
Ed Rollins, as always, good to see you. Thanks. Be sure to vote in our poll tonight. The question is, do you believe it's time for Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell to pivot to border security after the State Department issues a travel warning for Mexico because of runaway violence, murder, and the cartels. Cast your vote on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Follow me on Twitter at Lou Dobbs. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Instagram at Lou Dobbs Tonight. Rescue efforts continue in Southern California, where 17 people were killed. 8 are now missing following a series of deadly mudslides. A driver in Burbank was caught on video driving for his life, trying to outrun that rushing river of mud and debris running down a local street. On Wall Street, stocks closed at record highs. The Dow surging 206 points to a new record. The S&P also at a new record, up 19. The Nasdaq up 58 points. All 3 indexes at record highs. Volume on the big board today picking up to 3.6 billion shares. Walmart, the country's biggest employer, raising its minimum wage and giving employees bonuses, all because of the Trump tax overhaul. Walmart, one of more than 130 companies giving bonuses or increased benefits since the tax reform bill passed. And a reminder to listen to my reports 3 times a day, coast to coast on the Salem Radio Network. Up next, President Trump prays for transparency and openness. Congress, however, isn't following his lead. No. They're getting too cute by half, as they say. I'll take it up next to my commentary. We'll be right back. A few thoughts now on the strange nature of this Republican-led House and Senate. Lawmakers delivering a big victory for the president and the American people on tax reform, but it was legislation crafted largely behind closed doors. Futile congressional efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare took about 10 days of public activity. Didn't work. Of course, McConnell in the end just didn't deliver. On the reauthorization of FISA, Congress held a couple of meetings, one of which was completely derailed about questions about the Comey firing and the Russia collusion probe. As for DACA, just one hearing. And believe me, not a single lawmaker from either party was listening to anyone but the lobbyists and their donors. Compare that to the president's bipartisan meeting at the White House on immigration, border security, and DACA a week ago. A meeting that lasted 55 minutes and unfolded on camera. The president debating and negotiating live with lawmakers that American viewers watched on television. It was a great hour. Unprecedented, really. The president center stage, driving the discussion and debate. Talk about open and transparent. Talk about America the way it's supposed to operate. This was President Trump at his best, in the open, forthright, straightforward, in my opinion. And now Speaker Ryan, Senate Majority Leader McConnell, and the Dems, like Schumer and Pelosi, can decide whether they would like to join the president in an historic opportunity to bargain in full view of America, in the interest of the nation, and set aside so-called special interests. Or have Pelosi and Schumer, Ryan and McConnell live for too long in the swamp, now unable to find a path to serve the nation instead of the lobbyists and the special interests who dominate the swamp. President Trump is making it less difficult for them. To them, I would say, just follow Mr. Trump. In that way lies success. Our quotation of the evening, this one from John Adams, who said this: "There is danger from all men. The only maxim of a free government ought to be to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty." We're coming right back. The House of Representatives has voted to renew a foreign surveillance program despite privacy concerns by the commander-in-chief.
The president doesn't feel that we should have to choose between protecting American citizens and protecting their civil liberties. He wants to do both.
But what's the bigger threat? Big government or big technology? We take that up with Greg Jarrett here tonight. And this extreme sports junkie conquering mountain paths no bike has ever been on before. We'll show you the stunning performance from the French Alps here next. Stay with us. We're coming right back.
You might take something for your...
The House today voting to renew the government's foreign citizen surveillance program. It's known as Section 702 of the FISA bill. Critics say big government can't be trusted, but you don't hear much about big technology's astronomical expansion and contraction of American rights. Facebook is now planning to launch a home video chat device that would rival Amazon's Echo and Google Home. And Congress doesn't get a vote on how it works or whether a smartphone, smart TV, a smart appliance, or a dumb one that is part of the Internet of Things gets converted into a surveillance device, a device surveilling you and me. Well, joining us now to take up all that is going on in the nation's capital, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Let's start with FISA. Big victory for the renewal, despite what we see as a trampling, obvious trampling of citizen rights.
You can always count on the government, and especially the FBI and the Department of Justice, to break the rules and abuse their rights and Americans' rights. Look, it's a necessary evil.
I was afraid that would be the second thing you said.
It's a necessary evil to spy on radical Islamic terrorists.
Right.
The problem is that people at the FBI and the DOJ and elsewhere in the intelligence community abuse it, and they start spying on Americans, and they start unmasking names illegally, and they get away with it because they're very secretive about it. And Jeff Sessions and his Department of Justice are feckless and do nothing about it.
Yeah. And we do nothing about it, and we allow our elected officials to do nothing about it. I don't want to harp on this, but the reality is it's why we are watching Congress and the Senate slow roll the collusion, the Russia collusion investigations. It's why they are behind closed doors, no other reason, rather than letting the American public see what's going on and what they did. I am absolutely convinced of that.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. What they should do is fast roll the collusion that took place between Democrats, especially Hillary Clinton, and the Russians in paying for the dossier.
Oh, we can't get a special counsel of Hillary Clinton because there's evidence of a number of crimes.
Because that would make sense. It would be intelligent and logical. So, and the government is never this.
And a bad precedent.
Yes.
Oh, my God. Let's turn to Trump and Mueller. Some controversy about whether he will or he won't meet with Mueller in an interview. Your thoughts?
Well, as a lawyer, you know, you always tell your client, never talk to anybody but me, the lawyer. Trump did say that he had nothing to hide. He said this several months ago, and he'd be happy to give a full statement to Mueller.
Right.
But if I were to advise him, if I were his lawyer, I'd say, keep your mouth shut and just talk to me. You'll end up like Bill Clinton, who was forced to talk by the independent counsel pursuant to a grand jury subpoena. And he did so, and he got himself in a world of trouble for lying, which ended up in an impeachment.
No, you're exactly right, I think in both history and law, in your counsel. But the other thing is, there was evidence of a crime in the case of Bill Clinton.
Oh, yeah.
There is no evidence of any crime, as you well know, in this instance. And for him to sit down with the special counsel, to me, just sort of rankles. And I'm being obviously visceral, not legal in this. I just can't imagine sitting down with the special counsel when you've done not a damn thing wrong, or nor have you any evidence, or does he have any evidence, Mueller, of a crime?
There's no evidence of Trump-Russian collusion, but what you would worry about, I would worry about as a lawyer, is an obstruction entrapment by Mueller during the course of such an interview. Began asking him, well, why did you really ask the FBI Director James Comey about going easy on Flynn? What did you really mean when you sat down with Lester Holt and began talking about the firing of James Comey? Was it for a reason other than your constitutional duty of doing so? Were you trying to obstruct an investigation? I mean, it's not obstruction to do what the president did in firing Comey.
You're saying this just to make sure that we all agree with your position in counseling the president, aren't you? I mean, it's horrifying to think about what could happen there.
Yeah, he could fall into a trap, and Mueller is devious enough, especially Andrew Weissman, who is his top prosecutor, is untrustworthy. He is abusive. He weaponizes the law and tries to gain convictions in the absence of evidence and the law, and that's the guy I don't trust the most.
Greg Jarrett, we trust you. Thanks so much. Great to see you. Appreciate it. Please roll the video now and watch as this mountain biker rides up the French Alps before he picks up his bike and then climbs to the top. Of course you would. He then ends the adventure with a breathtaking, heart-stopping bike ride, oh yes, down the mountain. Now this just isn't right. in any way, shape, fashion. This makes me feel somewhat cowardly, and I don't like that kind of video. But so much of our video does exactly that. Up next, the military deploying bombers near North Korea as President Trump offers some new words for Kim Jong-un. Fred Fleitz joins us to take up the tensions with North Korea and how it may be that we salve those tensions. We'll be right back. The U.S. Air Force has dispatched 3 B-2 stealth bombers and 200 air personnel to Guam. The deployment puts the nuclear-capable B-2s within 3,500 miles of North Korea just days after talks were held with South Korea and Kim Jong-un's regime. President Trump also signaling he's open to talks with Little Rocket Man, as he once called him, telling the Wall Street Journal, quote, "I probably have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. I have relationships with people." The president declining to comment on whether he's talked with the North Korean leader. Joining us now is Fred Fleitz, Senior Vice President at the Center for Security Policy, former Chief of Staff to Ambassador John Bolton. And Fred, it's great to see you. Let's start with the B-52s. It seemed a little odd in the context of the Olympics and all of the apparent, ostensible advance in the relationship between North and South Korea and presumably the United States to see suddenly the dispatch of these B-2s.
Hey, Lou, it's great to be here. Well, the president is sending an important message to Kim Jong-un, and the message is, talk all you want, talk is good, but I'm not letting up the pressure. You have to denuclearize. And, you know, I think these talks are a good thing because as long as the North Koreans are talking, they're not testing nuclear weapons, they're not firing missiles, but the president is sending a message. The fact that you're talking doesn't mean we're going to let up the pressure.
And another area where pressure has not been applied at all by any administration save this one, and that is in reluctance to certify the Iranian nuclear deal. The president seems, well, perplexed by Iran, and we seem to be trying to find our footing there.
Well, Lou, this is an important point for the Trump presidency. The president has shown tremendous leadership and moral clarity on the protests, and he has to honor the protesters by killing this fraudulent deal. It can't be fixed, Lou. I've covered the Iran nuclear program for 20 years. I've written a book on this issue. Right. The only way out is John Bolton's plan to kill the deal. These minor changes being discussed on the Hill, they're simply going to extend this fraud. President Trump, honor the protesters. Please kill this deal.
Reports that General McMaster, the National Security Advisor, is working hard along with other members, some other members in the administration, trying to save it. There's obviously some tension there within the administration, or perhaps just simply a difference of view. It doesn't have to be anything beyond that, about how to proceed.
Well, you know, there's two people the president can listen to. There's McMaster and Tillerson. They've been against the president's Iran policy from his first day in office. They tried to prevent the president from decertifying the deal last summer.
Right.
Then there's John Bolton, who has always been with the president on this issue and has a plan to get out of the deal. It's a no-brainer, Lou. Side with Ambassador Bolton. That's the way to go. And
as far as Iran is concerned, it seems, and I say seems, to have ratcheted down its expansionist aggression in the region, in the Middle East. The status quo ante seems to be what we're looking at. What do you make of it?
You know, this is a fraudulent deal. It doesn't appreciably stop Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons, but we also know that Iran has spent billions of dollars it got from this deal in sanctions relief on terrorism, on the military, on sending troops into Syria, on sending missiles to the Houthi rebels in Yemen that they've used to attack Saudi Arabia with. Meanwhile, the Iranian people are suffering. They can't get enough to eat. Some are selling their kidneys, Lou, to raise funds. That's why it's obscene to continue this deal that's giving the mullahs money that they're using to sponsor terrorism and harm their own people.
Fred Fleitz, as always, we appreciate your insight. Thanks for being with us. Good to see you. Up next, open border Dems and rhinos ignoring national security threats as they call for DACA amnesty. I'll take it all up with Gina Loudon and Mark Simone right after the break. Stay with us. What's going on with these people?